hard and suspecting. Overview. For nearly a year now, the Imperial Synod has faced a growing rebellion against its authority. The problem surfaced in summer 383 YE when the construction of the Sword Scholars' Temple was completed. With the strength provided by this impressive commission, the scholars were able to resume their centuries-old opposition to the Synod, allowing them to partially stymie a number of mandates that the Synod was enacting, preventing them from taking effect in Urizen. The opposition to the Synod's leadership swiftly spread to the Wisdom Assembly, who took up the cause, helping it to spread throughout the Empire, to lands no sword scholar has ever visited. With numerous mandates failing, the General Assembly's ability to act would have been heavily curtailed. It might have been helpless to oppose the Wisdom Assembly, were it not for the timely action of Genevieve Barossa di Tassato in taking advantage of the Imperatrix's passing. In response, Raphael Barossa di Tassato issued thundering proclamations denouncing first the Sword Scholars and their founders Suleiman, and then the Wisdom Assembly itself. Neither the Wisdom Assembly nor the Sword Scholars seemed inclined to back down, and so the stage was set at the winter solstice for a final showdown between the General Assembly, the Wisdom Assembly, and their allies. While the conflict clearly has a political element, who wields power in the Synod, the arguments turn on a question of virtue. Are the Wisdom Assembly right to say that it's wise to question the Synod's mandates? Other assemblies have weighed in with similar calls to virtue, both in support of the General Assembly and in opposition to it. Now, the Synod must find a way to choose between these competing claims. Would the General Assembly find the strength of purpose to overrule the recalcitrant virtue assemblies? Would the assemblies abandon their protest, or would they double down? The General Assembly. The General Assembly has enacted a mandate that explicitly overturns the judgment of the Wisdom Assembly. This mandate ends the current situation across most of the Empire. The mandate leaves no doubt that the General Assembly have overruled the judgment of the Wisdom Assembly. For the next year at least, any statement of principle in any virtue assembly will not create a mandate in that virtue assembly. The General Assembly did not flinch. They endorsed a stinging rebuke of the Wisdom Assembly, explicitly refuting the virtue of their actions. Although the mandate did not get a greater majority, it did pass, and comfortably so, with the help provided by Genevieve's mandate that was sufficient to allow the Synod to take effective action. As a result of this mandate, the Imperial Assembly has asserted its position as the ultimate moral authority on virtues in the Empire. While followers of wisdom are still questioning the encyclicals issued by the Synod, their actions are no longer sufficient to convince everyone to doubt what is being said. For the foreseeable future, any mandate that's passed by the Imperial Synod will only require a lesser majority to take effect. Laying down the law in this manner has diminished the authority of the Wisdom Assembly, but it's also impacted every other virtue assembly. The General Assembly has demonstrated that it is the definitive source of virtuous teachings, not the virtue assemblies. If there's a conflict between the two, then virtuous citizens should look to the General Assembly for guidance. As a direct result of this emphatic statement, any statement of principle in any virtue assembly will not create a mandate that virtue assembly can enact. If any mandate does arise, then it would have to be passed by the General Assembly to carry any moral authority. For the next year at least, the virtue assemblies no longer have the moral authority to enact their own mandates themselves. The mandate brings a dramatic end to the ongoing conflict between the two assemblies, with the General Assembly now in an unassailable position. The Wisdom Assembly, however, had one last card to play. The Wisdom Assembly. The Wisdom Assembly have restated their position, reaffirming the importance that people test what they've learned. For the next year, the Cardinal of Wisdom can urge followers to question one specific mandate, causing it to need a greater majority to take effect. Although they were unable to stop the General Assembly from endorsing Rafael Barros's mandate, the Wisdom Assembly were not supine. Given an opportunity to back down in the face of the General Assembly's wrath, the Wisdom Assembly chose to endorse the mandate submitted by Galeen Netherwatch, explicitly encouraging their followers to continue their virtuous opposition to the Synod's rule. This mandate also failed to get a greater majority, but only by the slimmest of margins. In an ironic twist of fate, however, it also benefited from the temporary support provided by Genoveva's mandate. Galeen Netherwatch's name is well known to many dedicates of wisdom, and every word she speaks carries meaning. The impact of the mandate is muted by the definitive statement issued by the General Assembly, and it soon becomes clear that the Wisdom Assembly can no longer command sufficient support to question every mandate issued by the Imperial Synod. But with their resolve stiffened by Galeen's words, they're still able to provide effective interrogation if they focus their opposition on a single mandate. For the coming year, the Cardinal of Wisdom can submit a judgment to the Wisdom Assembly, calling on followers of the way to test what they learn. They can employ the potent aura, the challenge of wisdom, to empower key individuals to question what's being done. The Cardinal would need to clearly indicate which mandate they were urging people to question, but authorise their own named priest to use 25 doses of Liao to urge the faithful to test their knowledge and discarding anything that falls short. If that judgment passes, then the followers of wisdom across the Empire will question the Synod's mandate everywhere that it spread. As a direct result, the mandate the Cardinal was challenging would need to have a greater majority for it to have a substantive effect. The Assembly could choose to take this action before or after the original mandate was submitted. They could even wait until scrutiny had closed and the vote for judgment had been counted. The opportunity to resist the General Assembly in this way will be available for at least a year. If the Assembly of Wisdom use the power successfully, causing a mandate to fail because it only achieves a lesser majority at least once in that time, then the power will remain available indefinitely. The Loyalty Assembly. The Loyalty Assembly have urged citizens to only support those mandates that they felt were in line with their personal convictions. The primary effects of this mandate are superseded by the mandate issued by the General Assembly. For the next year, the Cardinal of Loyalty can urge followers to question one specific mandate, causing it to need a greater majority to take effect. The Wisdom Assembly's opposition to the use of mandates was complemented by the Loyalty Assembly. At the summit, the Assembly chose to endorse a mandate submitted by Yoruba Melampus Ditasato, encouraging all loyal citizens of the Empire to question Synod mandates, to consider their own feelings, and to only support those mandates that they felt were in line with their personal convictions. The position taken by the Loyalty Assembly is recent, and is couched in less confrontational language than the words of the Wisdom Assembly, but the effects are ultimately similar. For the coming year, the Cardinal of Loyalty can submit a judgment to the Loyalty Assembly, calling on followers of the way to defend those they care most about. They can employ the potent aura, the proof of loyalty, to empower key individuals to defend those they care most about and oppose any mandate that would try to influence them. The Cardinal would need to clearly indicate which mandate they were urging people to question, but authorise their own named priest to use 25 doses of Liao to urge the faithful to defend those you care most about. The outcome would be the same as if the Assembly of Wisdom had questioned the mandate. If the Assembly of Loyalty uses power successfully, causing a mandate to fail because it only achieves a lesser majority, at least once in the next year, then the opposition to oppose the Synod in this way will remain available indefinitely. The Courage Assembly. The Courage Assembly have rebuked those who question the mandates of the Imperial Synod. For the next year, the Cardinal of Courage can urge people who oppose those who question a mandate, allowing it to take effect with lesser majority. The Courage Assembly took the opposite view, and the greater majority of the Assembly chose to support Melchior of Edina's charge's judgment, urging courageous pilgrims to take action in support of the Synod's mandates, and not to allow others to block them. For the coming year, the Cardinal of Courage can submit a judgment to the Courage Assembly, empowering followers of the way to speak out and face unwelcome truths. They can employ the potent aura, the light of courage, to empower key individuals to speak out clearly in support of the mandate and rally support for it. Cardinal would need to clearly indicate which mandate they wanted to support, but authorise their own named priest to use 25 doses of Liao to urge the faithful to speak out in support of unwelcome truths. This mandate would have an effect if the mandate the Cardinal was supporting was being opposed by the corresponding power of the Assembly of Wisdom or the Assembly of Loyalty. In that case, the mandate would only require a lesser majority to pass, as normal. The opposition of the other assemblies would be neutralised. The mandate would also have an effect in Urizen, where the opposition of the sword scholars remains significant. In that case, the mandate would have some significant effect, even if it only achieves a lesser majority. The opposition of the sword scholars would be neutralised. However, the Cardinal of Courage would be encouraging their followers to stand in open opposition to followers of the Way. That opposition would be verbal, at least initially. The first time it happened, the effects would be muted. But if it happened a second time within the span of a year, then violence would be guaranteed to break out and the potential would arise for both assemblies to escalate the conflict further. If the Assembly of Courage uses power successfully, causing a mandate to take effect even if it only achieves a lesser majority, at least once in the next year, then the option to support a mandate in this way will remain available indefinitely. The Assembly of Pride passed a similar judgment, but rather than endorse the statement with Liao, Jenny Arbour chose to make their point as a statement of principle, perhaps as a result of the decision not to prolong the conflict with the other virtue assemblies. As a result, followers of Pride are aware of the issues, but aren't ready to act in response to a call from the Cardinal to do so. The Urizen Assembly. The Urizen Assembly have made clear that the modern sword scholars follow Suleiman. They don't copy her. No statement of principle about Suleiman Itaziel will lead to a mandate for the next year at least. The unequivocal statement of the General Assembly rebuking the Wisdom Assembly has restored the status quo throughout 9 of the 10 nations of the Empire. However, it wasn't sufficient to overcome the support of the sword scholars that Urizen have gathered. Thus, the situation in Urizen has not changed, and the opportunity to resolve that challenge has passed. This means that until some new turn of events changes things, any mandate that doesn't pass with a greater majority will have limited or no effect on Urizen. It's not impossible that a mandate might lead to a response in Urizen, but it won't lead to any immediate consequences for the people of the nation. The actions of the sword scholars have permanently stymied the influence of the Synod over the Urizeni people. Rather than continue to inflame the situation, the Urizen Assembly appears to have accepted this new status quo. The mandate submitted by Aspar and passed by the great majority does not repudiate Suleiman Itaziel, quite the opposite in fact, but it does explicitly disavow her methods. Crucially, it establishes a clear basis for the sword scholars to oppose the Synod, which is found on what Suleiman Itaziel said, not on what she did. As a result of the sword scholars adopting this position, no statement of principle that's about Suleiman Itaziel will lead to a mandate, for the next year at least. The situation in Urizen, where the sword scholars oppose any influence from the Synod, will remain, but the matter of Suleiman will cease to arouse controversy for the immediate future, and that would appear to be the end of the matter. There is just one issue remaining. The Varushkan Assembly. The Varushkan Assembly have issued a statement supporting the Wisdom Assembly that mandates should require a greater majority. The Assembly could endorse a mandate to make mandates need a greater majority to affect Varushka. At the last hour, the Varushkan Assembly chose to pass a statement of principle submitted for judgment by Nikolaevich Drakov, the former first preceptor of Varushka. Drakov laid out the position of the Varushkan Assembly very clearly. Mandates should require a greater majority. And to underline his point, the Assembly unanimously backed the statement of principle with primacy. Some Varushkans question Drakov's words, pointing out that the principled position the Eurozone have taken on this issue has caused them to miss out on valuable opportunities on at least one occasion. Others, however, take pride in the ability of their preceptors to lead the Varushkan assembly. Varushka has no problem achieving a greater majority, as Drakov's statement demonstrates, so why should they heed the mandates of other assemblies who can't do likewise? The assembly could settle the matter decisively with one final mandate. Our land leaves us no time for fools or wastrels. We will give hospitality to those who do not have the full support of the synod, but they can go when morning breaks. We send the name priest with 50 liao to urge every Varushkan citizen to heed only those mandates that have earned our respect. Synod mandate, Varushkan assembly. If this mandate is passed, then Varushka will then exhibit the same resistance to all synod mandates that now occur in Eurozone. This means that any mandate that doesn't pass with a greater majority will have limited or no effect on Varushka or Varushkan citizens. There might be a response in Varushka, but the mandate won't have any direct, negative or positive consequences, and the light of courage power of the Assembly of Courage would overcome this effect. This mandate represents the last opportunity to respond to the challenges that the Sword Scholars and the Wisdom Assembly have created. Now that the General Assembly has endorsed a categorical mandate on the matter, no further statements on this matter by any assembly will have an effect for at least the next year. For further reading, you might want to check out The Price of Wisdom, which is the Winter 383 YE Wind of Fortune that precedes this one, The Return of the Sword Scholars, which summarises the background behind the Sword Scholars and their involvement in the situation, and Considerations, which summarises the special considerations related to synod judgments at the coming summit.